It's Thursday, the 25th of September 2025, and welcome to the Water Action Platform. My name's Dr. Piers Clark, and I'm the founder and a director of ISLE, an independent consultancy that works with 350 water utilities around the world. Now, these Water Action Platform broadcasts exist purely to tell interesting and uplifting stories that will assist the water sector, help us all do better, learn from each other. We've been doing this for over 5 years, and with the help of the sponsors listed here, we'll continue to do so. Today, we're looking at nature as a service. Yes, you did hear that correctly. Not software as a service, or SaaS as some people call it, or data as a service, DaaS, but nature as a service. We also have a multi-headed tech showcase on wastewater treatment. But we're going to start with a story from the Ocean Sewage Alliance. Now, the mission of the Ocean Sewage Alliance is to eliminate sewage and wastewater pollution from our oceans and waterways, advance equitable and holistic actions that benefit people and nature. And recently, the Alliance co-authored a landmark study with Economist Impact. Now, the research revealed the staggering cost of inaction, nearly $20 billion every year from just 4 countries, and an estimated $4 trillion globally. But this particular story is much bigger than those numbers. It's about public health, it's about fisheries, it's about tourism, it's about the fundamental value of our clean water and how it impacts our lives. To explore this perspective, my colleague Anna Gunn spoke with 2 of the report's co-authors. First, Jasmine Fournier, Executive Director at Ocean Sewage Alliance. Now, Jasmine shared why this issue often goes unseen and why it matters everywhere.
Hi, Jasmine. Thank you so much for joining us on the Water Action Platform. It's wonderful to have you here.
Great. I'm so excited to be here and chat with you more. I looked over your website a bit, and it seems like you all are doing very interesting work. So I'm so excited to come here and talk about some of the work we've been doing.
Brilliant. So I'm going to dive straight in. The Ocean Sewage Alliance, you've created a report. It's been published now. It's been out. You've had time to socialize it. I'd love to get your insight as to how it's been received and a bit of the context about why now? Why is it so valuable now?
Sure. I'll start with the second question first, if that's okay. At Ocean Sewage Alliance, our work is to keep sewage out of the ocean. And for the most part, people are very open and receptive to that messaging. But what we kept coming into conflict with was, why does no one seem to care? And why does it seem like it's a very low number on a many long list of things to do? I think most people are aware of the issues with plastics. Some people might be aware of the issue with ocean acidification, and very few people are aware of the global issue of sewage and wastewater pollution. And since it's so ubiquitous, and since it happens, say, even in my municipality, we have issues with sewage pollution. New York City has issues with sewage pollution. I don't know what the situation is where you are, but I'm sure there's some level of issue with sewage pollution. So despite us all having a relationship with it, most people are just unaware. So we talked to a lot of our colleagues to see what might help people to understand the gravity and the scalability of sewage and wastewater pollution. And unfortunately, a lot of the conversations around pollution and ocean really have to do with economics and the dollar amounts associated with some of these problems. And while I think many people too, they understand sewage in the ocean, bad. Don't want to swim in sewage. It's bad for fisheries. It's bad for, I live in New Orleans. We have a large oyster farming industry here, so bad for oysters as they are filtering the water, but can we help to make something that makes sense to policymakers and decision makers that are really looking at dollars and return on investment? So that's how we came to this idea, the economic impact of sewage and wastewater pollution. And what was exciting about the study is that for about 4 countries, we were able to calculate about a $20 billion annual loss in GDP, which for me is a lot of money. And I think, in my personal opinion, I might be biased, solving this problem, I think, one, now we can show there's an investment perspective where you can save money. And 2, it has multiple different benefits across sectors for public health, for fisheries, for tourism, for folks working at utilities, having money to make sure their utility is properly working and maintained. To me, it's a win, 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 win. What surprised me was how hard it was to come up with some of these numbers and how hard it was, I think, in a sense. So we looked at three different sectors. We looked at fisheries, agriculture, and we looked at public health. But there is an intrinsic value of nature that we weren't really able to quantify in this particular study. So what I mean to say is there's a value that we receive from access to the ocean and the access to unpolluted waters or waters that don't have algal blooms. I can give an example. I live in New Orleans and we're right next to the Mississippi River. We live about half a mile from the river. And the river discharges into the Gulf of Mexico. And we have a very large dead zone where the algal blooms from nutrient pollution basically makes an area that has no oxygen. And that means that fish, crabs, other creatures that rely upon that like oxygen rich and can't live. And so what's the cost of that to us as people who want to thrive and live in a coastal area? And we weren't really able to capture that. Or what's the mental health value of access to beaches that aren't polluted with sewage? And I think the tension between economic impacts and not having extractive things happening with the ocean is sort of hard, because if the only value we're placing on the ocean is for fisheries, then we're missing a big chunk of the value of what the ocean means to us. Well, I'll say that $19.6 billion figure is for the 5 countries in our case study. So if you do just like back of the envelope math, globally, for all the countries of the world, it's over $4 trillion. So the impact is actually quite huge.
What is the one thing that you'd want global water professionals to take away from this report?
Sure. Well, I feel like global water professionals get it. And I think and I'm speaking widely, is that they understand that we need more money for infrastructure and more money for maintenance. And I think what I would ask us all to do is figure out how can we move that lever to get people and policymakers to start really investing in infrastructure around sewage and wastewater and drinking water. And remember that investment in infrastructure means maintenance. And I think that if we collectively could better advocate for that, maybe we could be in the same place where I think most people understand that plastic pollution is an urgent threat.
Jasmine, thank you ever so much for your time today. It's been wonderful to speak with you.
Now, as Jasmine makes clear, the impacts of sewage pollution are everywhere, from coastal ecosystems to public health to the food on our tables. But to unlock political will and investment, we also need to understand the economic cost. And that's where economist impact comes in. So to explore the financial burden of sewage pollution and why this evidence matters now more than ever, Anna spoke to Shivangi Jain, Senior Manager at Economist Impact.
Hi, Shivangi. Thank you again for joining us on the Water Action Platform. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to dive straight in and talk about this study and about why was it so important to produce this study now? What's about this timing that's critical to getting it out there?
Sure. So this project is part of the Back to Blue initiative. And the goal of the initiative is really to drive measurable impact on ocean health. So it's around raising awareness of some of the key challenges that are facing the ocean and how we can better manage and protect the ocean. And so I think where this study really came from was recognizing an evidence gap in that space. So while we talk a lot about things like plastic pollution and how that impacts the ocean, I think one of the things we realized at the very start as we were conceptualizing this research was that not a lot of people really talk about wastewater pollution. It's something that hasn't really been researched extensively. We've spoken to a number of experts as well, and they identified this as a gap in kind of building a more holistic understanding of the challenges that are facing the ocean from climate change, from human activities, etc. And so that's really what drove this research. So I think for me, actually, one of the most interesting, I guess, or surprising findings was that when you look at the economic losses that we've estimated, they're even quite high when you look at countries where there's actually relatively high levels of wastewater treatment in principle. So, for example, if you look at the UK, which is one of the countries that we've studied, the numbers, yes, are smaller than some of the other countries that we've looked at, because the UK has a 97% wastewater treatment rate. But that still doesn't mean that it's not seeing any loss. So, for example, if you look at fisheries in the UK, they see significant impacts from nitrogen discharges. That's one of the things that we found. And so I think what this really highlights is that even treated wastewater can be harmful if it doesn't fully sort of address nutrient pollution.
What sectors are most affected by those losses?
Of course. So the 19.6 billion figure is, as you said, sort of that headline figure that we've reported on. But I think, and it's a striking figure, as you said, it's quite a large number, especially when you think about the fact that that's actually only 4 countries that we've modeled there that contribute to that 19.6 billion figure. But I think what's actually more helpful is to unpack that number a little bit and see what's actually driving it, because that number in itself is kind of meaningless until you know what's actually beneath the surface, so to say. So as you said, the study looks at kind of different sectors, and that 19.6 billion figure is made up of impacts across 3 key sectors that we've looked at. So that's agriculture, fisheries, and human health. Now, the vast majority of that 19.6 billion impact that we see, 80% in fact of that, is coming through from agriculture. So farmers in many regions are relying on untreated wastewater for irrigation. Over time, this leads to soil degradation, crop contamination, and lower yields, and that's what's driving the numbers that we're seeing. 15% then, on top of that 80% from agriculture, is coming from fisheries. So that's sort of when wastewater discharges into water bodies like oceans, lakes, etc. That causes increased nutrients in the water, decreases levels of oxygen, and results in fish kills. So that's the impact that we're seeing there on fisheries. And then finally, the remaining 5% of that 19.6 billion is coming from human health. And you might say that that's not too big if you think about it in the grand scheme of the numbers that we're saying. 5% seems fairly minimal. But then if you think about the numbers in and of themselves, they're actually fairly substantial. So just to give you an example, in India, we've seen we've estimated annual impact of $250 million every year, just from the impact on human health. And just to put that into perspective, that's about 0.2% of the country's healthcare budget. So that's a large burden on an already strained sector. So that's also fairly significant. So there's a lot that we haven't measured in here, and the numbers are definitely underreported and on the conservative side. So that 19.6 billion, we're talking here about how big it is, but actually in reality, it's probably a lot bigger than that. And the reason for that is because capturing all of the economic impacts, social impacts in a single model is both impractical and infeasible. So what we've kind of chosen to do with our analysis is to focus on those which are either more significant or where better data is available to allow us to measure it in sort of a robust and meaningful way.
So that sounds very much as if there's some good steps being made, but a lot more to do. Shubhangi, thank you ever so much for talking with us today.
Of course. Thank you so much, Anna. It's been a pleasure.
Together, Jasmine and Shubhangi have highlighted the 2 sides of the same story. Sewage and wastewater pollution is both a human crisis and an economic liability. The message is clear. This is not just an environmental problem, but one that carries trillions of dollars in costs globally. Now, the encouraging truth is that this is solvable. With stronger infrastructure, sustained investment and collective advocacy, we can ease the stress on our oceans. We can safeguard communities and realise the value of clean water for generations to come. Now, regular viewers will know that we often include a technology showcase highlighting a particular solution or technology. This month, we're doing something a little bit different. We've invited Karen Georges, Managing Director for ISLE UK, to provide a mini lecture on various technologies that can address the wastewater treatment challenge.
We know that untreated sewage entering our water bodies is causing significant environmental and public health issues. But we can look at this as an opportunity to change how we approach sanitation, treatment, and the use of resources. Here, I'm going to talk through a few practical innovations and examples which are actively helping reduce wastewater damage. Methods to treat sewage are well known, and processes such as trickling filters and activated sludge are common across the globe. These aren't without issues, though, with biological treatment performance susceptible to changing flows, to weather, as well as to shocks from toxic loads. There is also the concern around emissions of nitrous oxide from biological steps. But several companies are creating novel solutions to either provide cheaper, simpler treatment, or to reduce emissions and/or to treat to a higher standard and remove contaminants to allow safe water reuse. One example is from a Dutch company called Bluecon. They've designed a system for small to medium sites which they claim not only provides treatment at half the cost of traditional biological wastewater treatment, but which also allows the reuse of the resulting treated wastewater. It is a modular system which houses physical treatment processes adapted for the required water quality. The steps include coagulation, flocculation, flotation, and filtration. There is also a disinfection step and further polishing steps that can be added. It claims to be able to remove microplastics, nutrients, and chemicals such as PFAS. Such containerized solutions could offer a good way to rapidly provide a high standard of wastewater treatment to communities that might otherwise not have access. To date, they've installed units in underserved communities in places including Romania, Chile, and Canada. We can take sewage treatment one step further and look at the principles of resource recovery, viewing wastewater as a concentrated stream of useful materials and potential products. Creating a closed loop can help prevent some pollutants reaching our water bodies. It can also create an economy around it, encouraging communities, organisations, and governments to value it instead of seeing it as a waste that needs to be disposed of as cheaply as possible. Often when we think of resource recovery, our minds would go to large-scale solutions, recovering, say, nutrients from wastewater at complex facilities. We certainly see many of these solutions at ISLE, and these absolutely have a value. But resource recovery is open to all, and it is one of the key components of a circular economy. A circular economy can help progress towards environmental equality, something that is very important when we think of who is suffering the most from environmental degradation. The Sanergy Collaborative brings together companies with a mission to solve sanitation challenges using circular economy principles, particularly in low-income areas. By providing public-private funding mechanisms and governance to develop and implement cost-effective citywide sanitation services at scale, they are able to work with partners to create fertilisers and protein products, including black soldier fly larvae for agriculture from the organic waste, directly benefiting their local communities. On the other end of the scale, perhaps, are companies who are looking at new treatment methods and the opportunity of recovering resources of high economic value. One such company, Met Zero, has funding through the Offwater Innovation Fund in the UK and is being trialled with Northumbrian Water. Met Zero utilises microbial electrolysis cells to treat wastewater. It uses naturally occurring electrogenic bacteria to digest waste anaerobically. And by applying a controlled potential difference across the electrode, the system can recover high-value products including hydrogen, ammonia and nitrogen compounds from wastewater. Now, these projects can potentially generate an income for the wastewater company and reduce the demand on raw materials. In the more complex system, where runoff and stormwater is collected alongside domestic sewage, there will be storage and overflow points designed into the sewers. Without these, the wastewater treatment works would become quickly overwhelmed. But these do mean that sometimes untreated sewage is discharged. With climate change bringing more intense storms and with increasing urbanisation of our landscapes, more rainwater and runoff is entering our sewers. Combine this with ageing infrastructure and you have the perfect storm for unintended discharges of untreated sewage. Most places are looking at separating out the sewers or building storage capacity within the network. The Thames Tideway, the Copenhagen Harbour Storage Basin, and the stormwater management and road tunnel in Kuala Lumpur are all good examples of this. Sustainable urban drainage is also increasingly being used, albeit not enough. However, we can also be creative in reducing storm discharges to sewer, or by finding ways of preventing the overflows. In 2013, a water square was opened in Rotterdam. This is an example of how surface runoff can be stored in an integrated way with community support. This is a public space with sporting and leisure facilities such as basketball courts, skating ramps and seating integrated. During storms, the space fills with runoff. There are 2 shallow basins to collect runoff from surrounding surfaces and rooftops, and a 3rd central basin for heavier rainfall. After the storm, the water infiltrates back into the ground. The work was commissioned following consultation with the local community, inviting ideas and designs to be put forward. This also allows the public to see and understand the issue around urbanisation and increased runoff. So it serves as stormwater storage, a community space, and an educational opportunity. We're increasingly being an information and data-driven society. The development of low-cost sensors and open data on water quality, combined with organised citizen science projects such as those coordinated by the river keepers in the United States, not only educate communities around the causes of poor river health, but also provide decision makers with compelling evidence of where harm is being seen by wastewater discharges. Improving water quality through reducing pollution from wastewater is one of the most important challenges of our time. The impacts of pollution will be felt more acutely with climate change. Thinking creatively and innovating can help us.
Quite right. Well said. Thank you, Karen. Now, you've no doubt heard of software as a service, SaaS. You may also have heard of data as a service, DaaS. But now there's a new kid on the block, nature as a service, or NAS. What is it? Why is it important? How will it help with the climate crisis? To answer these questions, I recently spoke with Matt Johnson from the global company NTT. I opened by asking Matt, what is nature as a service?
So nature as a service, really, from my point of view, is really about putting value on diversity and ecosystems so that organizations, such as utilities and energy companies within the UK, can incorporate them into their decision-making process. And it really is a shift from seeing nature as that passive resource to managing it as I believe, as an active service. So what does that really mean for businesses? Well, that means you've got to measure the biodiversity impacts with real-time data. We need to enhance resilience through nature-based solutions, and we'll talk about those later. And really important, how we align with regulations like the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, or TNFD. And finally, it's about creating financial incentives for conservatism, such as biodiversity credits. And I think by taking that approach, companies can future-proof their operations, reduce their environmental risks, and what's really important, contribute to a more healthier planet.
Yeah, I love this idea of sort of monetizing how conservation gets delivered. It's what will make it happen. It provides a much better incentive. Okay, well, I get that. How does technology play into this? Why don't people just do it with the tools that they've already got? What is the role of technology in this initiative?
To me, Piers, I think there's 3 key drivers, and the 3 key elements that I'm really entrenched and embed myself in with our clients. And that's one is around, we all talk about AI, but that's really important. IoT and satellite imagery. They're really making it possible now to monitor and protect biodiversity like never before. And some of those innovations at the moment are including satellite monitoring and analytics, and that helps us track deforestation and ecosystem health. IoT sensors, which are already there in a lot of organizations, but now we're spreading that sensor footprint, as it were, to measure things like soil and water quality in real time. Digital twins has been around for quite a while, but now we're really enhancing that to simulate more around how human activities impact biodiversity, not capital infrastructure as it's typically being used. And last but not least, which really goes back to that financial incentive we talked about is blockchain-based biodiversity credits and how we can incentivize those efforts to move that forward.
And for people not familiar with these, I mean, this is so important because, with these BNG credits, you've got to stop people from denuding the ground before they do this work so that they get maximum credits. And that's where they use, as you said, the satellite imagery to go back in time, see what it looked like beforehand. The blockchain to protect the credits so that people don't sell them onwards. I mean, that's so... It's astonishing, isn't it, how this modern technology is really coming to play to make to provide levers here. It's very exciting. Now, you obviously work for NTT Data. People watching this broadcast might not know who NTT Data are. So can you give me the 20-second description?
Yeah, sure. So NTT Data, our roots we're part of the NTT Group. So we're one of the largest global telecommunication companies on the planet. We're very large. We're over 100 billion in revenue. We have over 300,000 professional employees across the globe. And we cover everything from satellite communications, obviously as inbred in a telecommunication company, through to the systems integration, advisory, strategy work, managed services, cloud. And we have an extremely large sustainability practice within the UK and Europe. I hope that's short and sweet.
No, that was very good. And the bit I wanted to sort of get across was the scale, because usually the bigger organizations get, the more cumbersome they get, the less innovative they get, because you end up with lots of procedures and processes. And I love the fact that NTT Data, at the scale you are, you're still striving to be quite disruptive. All right, now let's come back to nature as a service. Give me some case studies. I want to get a sense of, is this just a pipe dream or is stuff actually happening?
No, as I say, these are real. The 4 areas that I talked about using AI, IoT, sensor information is really, really important. So at NTT Data, we're helping organizations look at NAS, such as data-driven decision-making. So we're using AI-powered analytics and satellite imagery. As a telecommunication company, the one thing we're really special is we own the satellite assets out there. So we actually can manage and monitor land degradation in real time. And we're using that data for companies looking to minimize their environmental impact and comply with emerging regulations. Secondly, we do, and a lot of organizations do this, but we do have that as well, is regulatory compliance and ESG reporting. So we provide platforms that automate ESG reporting, help companies align with TNFD and the EU biodiversity strategy and other frameworks that are out there. Thirdly, we do AI-driven risk assessment. So we've got predictive AI models that help companies assess their biodiversity risk before the project even begins. As you mentioned before, by not getting it right, there's a massive cost implication about not getting that right and the regulatory fines that could be part of that. Again, in smart cities and urban biodiversity, we're helping there, looking at green corridors to intelligent water management systems. And our goal is, which is a real good ethos of us, is to create urban environments that support both people and nature. And last but not least, and we've talked about that before, is biodiversity credit platforms. We develop a lot of those through biodiversity marketplaces, so businesses can invest in nature and offset their impact in a transparent and verifiable way.
Nice, I like it. Now, and you obviously mentioned across a lot of industries. Just tell me finally, are you doing stuff with water utilities? And if so, can you say who?
I can't say who, Piers, but we're working with several. We've got a lot of work that we've leveraged in Spain. Obviously, the weather in Spain is a lot more severe than, historically that we've had in the UK around drought management and vegetation management. And we're using those solutions across a couple of utility clients in the UK, which we're hopefully nice to share sometime in the future.
Thank you, Matt. As Matt mentioned there, they are talking to a number of utilities about trialling their nature as a service offering, and we hope to bring you some direct feedback from the end users, ideally, on how those trials have gone over the coming months. But this is a very exciting development. And finally, we want to finish today's broadcast by highlighting a joint initiative between WaterAid and Sewage Alliance. It will be showcased at Vatten 2025. Now, WaterAid is an international not-for-profit organisation working to ensure that everyone, everywhere, has access to clean water, decent sanitation and good hygiene. Basic human rights that should not be dependent upon where you're born. WaterAid are active in 22 countries and work with local partners, influencing decision-makers and combining practical solutions with advocacy to improve not just people's health, but their dignity and life opportunities as well. Vatten is the premier event for water circularity. It's being held in the Swedish Exhibition and Conference Centre in Gothenburg on October the 21st to the 23rd, and you can get tickets online. This year, Svenska Massen, the event's organisers, the people behind Vatten 2025, and WaterAid are joining forces on a fundraising campaign to support WaterAid's mission, ensuring everyone, everywhere, has access to clean water, decent sanitation and good hygiene. Visitors and companies can get involved throughout the event, and in a brilliant gesture, all the speakers' gifts are going to be donated directly to WaterAid. So if you're attending Vatten 2025, please look out for the campaign and take part. Together, we can help more people around the world gain access to safe water and the dignity that brings. With that, we come to the end of this month's broadcast. Once again, I thank our sponsors shown here. The next Water Action platform will be released on Thursday, the 23rd of October at the usual times. As per the last couple of months, we'll be coming to you via LinkedIn, so follow the Isle Media stream on LinkedIn to subscribe. Until then, keep asking questions, keep sharing, and keep safe.